Welcome to the Sacred Child Summit. I'm your host, Kathleen Sherrick. I'm pleased to introduce to you today Dr. Amit Goswami, and he's coming to us from India. Thank you, Dr. Goswami, for being with us. Dr. Goswami is a professor, a researcher, a best-selling author, quantum science pioneer, and a spiritual practitioner. He's a retired professor from the physics department of the University of Oregon for nearly 30 years. He's a renowned pioneer of the new paradigm quantum science based on the primacy of consciousness. He has written several groundbreaking popular books based on research on quantum science and consciousness. Among them, The Self-Aware Universe, The Quantum Brain, and Quantum Spirituality with Dr. Valentina Onisor, The Quantum Doctor, Physics of the Soul, Quantum Creativity, and the Everything Answer book. In 2009, Dr. Goswami started a movement called quantum activism that is now gaining ground in North and South America across Europe and India. In 2019, he and his collaborators established Quantum Activism Vishwalayam, acting as Department of Quantum Science at the University of Technology in Jaipur, India. And they have developed a master's and a PhD program in quantum science in health, prosperity, and happiness. Where do I sign up for that, Dr. Goswami? That sounds wonderful. Dr. Goswami was featured in the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? And the documentaries, The Dalai Lama Renaissance and The Quantum Activist. Welcome, Dr. Goswami.
Thank you, Kathleen. Glad to be here.
I'm so honored to have you here in our conversation today about quantum parenting. You have said that quantum physics can put value and meaning back into our lives. So we're so excited to learn more about what that means for our everyday lives today. So in layperson's terms, Dr. Goswami, what does quantum mean and why would parents care about this?
Here's the thing. A child is born in a very wonderful state that in quantum physics we recognize as non-locality, a state of empathic connection with the mother. This has been not understood properly in many modern traditions. Spiritual traditions did acknowledge this. In India, children are called God until they are of age 5. So there is some recognition, but in America, especially nowadays, there is no recognition of the spiritual connection. Even personal psychologists are confused because they think that there is no cognition except mental, but that is also wrong because animals cognize. What do they cognize with? With feeling. So children not only intuit because they have open connection with non-locality, non-local connection with consciousness as the ground of being, what we call spirituality, but they also connect through their feelings. And so missing this has been a big problem in child development. Mothers miss it. Fathers, of course, don't even have that kind of connection unless they establish it. So that's the first thing about parenting that quantum science notices.
I see. And non-locality then, Dr. Goswami, non-locality would mean what exactly? So that means that you're communicating without regard to time and space?
Yes, without signals, without exchanging any signal outside of time and space. And this happens because the child were intimately connected, came from mother's womb, part of mother. And this being part of mother, of course, it goes both ways. If the mother suffers from mental discomfort, disorder during pregnancy, late stages, especially after the first 5 weeks, that could be also bad for the child. In fact, we think that some of the autistic cases of children That probably came from mothers being under mental stress during the late pregnancy times, because husbands start neglecting them, and then mothers get depressed, and that depression gets the child depressed, and it's a complex process. But children do remember some of it, although they are not experiencing separate from their mother. That happens only after they're born. However, in quantum science, there is a process called delayed choice. So at the moment of birth, all those stuff that happened during the child was in mother's womb, that's collapsed in the child's experience. Now, of course, child only cognizing with quantum self, the non-locality, and also with feeling. And those memories are very hard to retract, that is true. But some of it may affect the child's future anyway. So this is a very interesting subject for research.
It is. And so non-locality is one aspect then that you mentioned of quantum parenting. What are some others that would be good for us to be aware of?
Because we live in a very materialist influenced worldview, even religions are really now not part of everyday vocabulary or practices of the average American family or family anywhere. Therefore, what has happened is that the child's emotions, that is also ignored. It's overemphasis of intellect, overemphasis of just the mental processing. Now we have to remember that everybody agrees that mental processing, much of the child development in mental processing, especially the memory making process of mental thought, that is after the child is born. Human children are not fully formed in the mother's womb. There's a lot of development that is after the child is born. And one of these developments is that the mental memory apparatus is not fully ready. The hippocampus is not fully ready until about age 5. But starting about age 1, the child has sort of a capacity of mental thought, and this is when children start their life as a intellectual. I mean, mental processing can happen. Before that, feelings dominate. And here is the problem, because feelings are not recognized by modern parents. They don't recognize, except of course, negative emotions. Those are naturally built into the brain. So that they recognize. So child has to cry to be recognized. But if the child is happy, mothers do occasionally recognize, but usually people just ignore it. So these things, positive emotions of children, neglecting that and not participating in it, can easily produce what we recognize now more and more as trauma. Childhood trauma has many sources, but this parental neglect of children's happy instances is probably a major thing that happens.
Wow, that's a quite a different way to look at it. That we might take for granted if our child, even an infant, is happy or gurgling or making cooing noises, we might take it for granted, you're saying, instead of giving it its proper attention as part of really strengthening the child's incoming body, incoming personhood.
Yeah, it is as simple as if I meet you, what do I first thing I do or you do? We smile at each other, right? So children, when they're smiling, they want to share. The reason I smile at you is that I want to share greetings, etc., etc. And it's a child's offering. Okay, celebrate with me. I'm feeling happy. And if the parents don't do that, imagine children being overly sensitive. They don't know that their parents can be very insensitive. So cognitive dissonance can easily be created.
And in the quantum science world, what techniques can we use to be more aware of the emotionality of our children at whatever age, in utero or whatever age they might be?
It's very simple, really. I mean, look, you have been a mother, I assume. If you pick up a child, right, you feel happy. When you're feeling happy, where is the happiness coming from? It's coming from the child. And so if the child is especially expressing the happiness in terms of, obviously, smile is one symptom, but there are other ways that children express their happiness. And then you have to share, and we share by speaking, but also can be shared non-locally. And here the father has to learn to pick up the very young children, and fathers often are a bit reluctant. I know I was, because I was a total ignoramus. And this is what happens. We don't
Did
know.
you say you were a total ignoramus?
I did not know any of these things. I did not know that we have non-local powers. I did not know that baby communicates with us non-locally so much more than locally with noises or whatever. They cannot speak, of course, that we all accept, but we don't realize that much communication is non-verbal anyway. And children do that aplenty.
And so that non-local communication, I've read that you talk about, for example, telepathy and things like this. This is non-local. So are our babies in utero or in their early years of life, are they communicating with us telepathically that we may not be picking up?
Well, not in the telepathically, in the mental sense, because they remember they cannot speak, and that is true of the internal situation as well. They just haven't developed the mental capacity of memorizing, so mental experiences do not collapse yet until about age 1. So before then, the crucial time is between age 0 and 1, and that is the time for parents to establish that non-local connection with the baby separated from mother's womb. It's no longer automatic, so mother has to continue to making effort. And father never had the non-local connection, so father has to establish the non-local connection. This is the father's chance, by the way, because after age 1, children more and more pick up mental thought, and in mental thought, non-locality disappears. Is very hard. I mean, telepathy, of course, exists, but children are not sophisticated enough to establish telepathic connections. Their connection is with feeling, heart. And so parents have to learn to connect with their children with their heart. Mothers have it naturally, but fathers everywhere suppress emotions. And
fathers and perhaps partners who are not necessarily the carriers of the child. It sounds like what you're saying. Anyone that's involved peripherally outside of the actual womb, that they're
here we are so so much oriented towards our own personal life, the me-centeredness. Look, it's a mystery why people still get children if they don't pay attention to them.
Oh my goodness. Well, you talk about the quantum self, and I think you talk about it in terms of being fully present. Is that what you mean by the quantum self, being fully present in the experience as a parent or as a person?
Children has the natural capacity of being fully present. Adults don't, but adults can learn. And picking up a child and holding it close makes it easier to keep attention to that present centeredness. So it is true that we have some brain difficulties with adulthood. Our brain does not permit us to be in present centered. There is all the memories, it's presenting it constantly, so we get sidetracked. But this is the whole beauty of having a child, because if you hold the child, this is the key. Touching is extremely important. If you hold the child, then a natural connection gets established. And if you pay attention, you can be in that non-local present-centeredness, off and on, not as good as the child, but still you can do. And you become happy as a result. This is why children are so much happiness producing. If we pick them up, if we pay attention, we are happy because we pick up children's happiness.
And you know that there's so many more emerging fields of study around energy medicine, energy psychology, and the whole notion that everything is energy. How does that fit with the quantum parenting approach?
When I say feeling is nothing but feeling of vital energy. This energy is not physical energy. There is a lot of misconceptions about it in the New Age literature and from non-understanding. No, it is a very specific non-physical energy. It's energy associated with the non-physical software that our organs have. For example, why do we have it in the heart? Because heart ordinarily is just a blood pump. But when we develop the capacity of love, then the immune system is suspended momentarily. This is why love is so much dependent on being vulnerable. You have to give up your defensiveness. If you are defending, the immune system is acting, then love cannot enter. But if the defense is suspended, then it turns out that the heart makes a quantum leap to a quantum state, a coherent state, we call it. That's a technical term. What means is that parts of the heart are all dancing in unison, in synchrony. And so the heart becomes quantum, and when the heart becomes quantum, the energies associated with it, that non-physical energy, becomes love energy. So this is the thing. I mean, in this area, this heart, there is the immune system and there is also heart. The immune system has to suspend itself. That's the defensiveness. So that heart becomes quantum, and that's love. So this little trait, not to be defensive, is very, very important around a child. And so parents have to be in sync. If the parents are fighting, for example, they both become defensive, and then the child automatically will be unhappy because it cannot connect to either of them. And when it does not connect to the mother even, then it panics and it starts crying. And this phenomenon at least is recognized by the mother. Fathers don't even recognize it. But so, you know, all this is part of quantum parenting. People should not have children when their marriage is falling apart, when they don't love each other anymore, when they're not in synchrony anymore.
And you're saying that because the energetic connection does not facilitate a loving or healthy relationship with the child coming in. Is that what you mean? Mm-hmm.
And intellectual males are totally head-centered. They should get some training of opening their heart before they become parent. I wish I knew. I mean, I did not close my heart entirely, so my children were not completely deprived of my parental love. But it is true that the pressure on me, work pressure on me, was enormous. And so I worked so hard that I was also tired most of the time when I should have interacted with them. And so, you know, it was a very difficult thing. And there's also child rearing, we just don't have it. We just don't have it within us to do it properly. And this is not something where the person can do very much. The society and culture has to cooperate.
Well, it's very important what you're saying, it seems to me, about vulnerability, because even mothers, parents, partners, those who are looking to host and welcome children have so many, sometimes self-imposed pressures on them. They're looking for what's the best way to do this? What does this blog say? What does this information say? And sometimes the information is conflicting. And so now what do I do as a new parent? And so that is not a place of vulnerability. That's a place of trying to control. And it is a defensive position. And thank you so much for illuminating that vulnerability is what opens us up. That's so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And
Instead of thinking this way, that way, people should approach a relationship with a child with the open heart.
That this is a unique relationship. This child and me, this child in our family is a unique relationship, and to be open to that.
Yes.
I see.
And then continuing in the same vein, look at what happens when the child is growing up. So imagine the child is now age 5 and it is ready to take autonomy. This, the psychologists have established. Milton Erickson gave us a theory of child development where he gives it clearly that, okay, and Piaget even recognizes that, yes, that around that age, a major change takes place. So everybody recognizes that age 5, but look at the pressure we are putting on people more and more to have more preschool, more preschool. In Britain, they already have started preschool at 3.5. Imagine that. So they are taking valuable pressure, valuable time away from that quantum non-locality which the children could enjoy, and parents with him, with her, and all is falling apart because too much stress on the children learning mental processing so quickly.
I see. So what you're saying is that mental processing, either kind of enforced or surrounding a child when they're young, can actually start to detach them from their natural non-locality.
That's right. And this is why they have this, many children suffer from trauma. Many children suffer from abnormal relationship with their mother. They're missing the mother non-locally. So what happens? They try to transfer that affection, and complications arise in mother-child relationship that gets carried on through the future. So these are very important times where parents have to be sensitive, and the society has to cooperate. Society must not insist that the children's education, which school the child will go into, that will depend on getting preschool preparation and all this. This is abomination. In Japan, they're doing it so badly that parents are forced to do preschooling early. Otherwise, the children cannot get into a good school. At least in America, public schools don't have any choice. They have to let you in. So if you are in a good public school district, then the child is going to get some fairly good education. But if the child is, on the other hand, in a bad school district, imagine the difficulties. So, it continues. So going back to age 5. So what happens in age 5 when the child is demanding autonomy? All right, and here is the thing. Because in the materialist system, there is no recognition of feelings in the body, no recognition of the heart that we spoke of, no recognition of the other place, navel, where also we have experiences of feeling. And that experience is what gives us autonomy. Autonomy is not a mental thing. Piaget completely misunderstood. He thought it is a pre-rational thinking to beginnings of rational thinking. That is the transfer that is taking place. No, that is only part of it. But the main part that is taking place is that a quantum leap is taking place, can take place at about age 5. That's what gives the child autonomy. If the child does not take that quantum leap, then the child will be forever a weakling, will completely depend on others for forming their opinion. This is why you see so many people that can be politically persuaded, manipulated so easily, because they don't have any strength in the navel. They are just weaklings who disguise, they of course disguise themselves quite well. If you are inferior, you hide it with racism, superiority, sexism, and all this. If you are a male, if you are a female, you cannot hide it so well, but because you have to depend on your supporter partner for that having that strength. But these things are exacerbated because of also information processing. If the child is already processing cell phones and social media, I mean, I am so disgusted that a 5-year-old child is given access to social media, access to Instagrams, becomes attached to having her picture every day. The first thing she has to get is approval from the Instagram followers that I look okay. If they don't approve, then she is not okay. And that feeling giving anorexia and all those eating disorders later on. So it is just mistake after mistake we are making in child upbringing. Please go ahead.
And you are talking about the navel connection and the heart connection, and you have discussed in your books the vital energy centers of the body, the chakras. And so is there a way, how can parents help their children develop the strength in those areas so that they have this more fortitude and a deeper sense of themselves going forward when they're encountering these things within their peers?
Yeah, thank you. This is the basic question. Parents must be sensitive not to differentiate between male children and female children. This has been going on since when in human development, male-dominated society always have insisted that females don't need the navel chakra strength, don't need to activate the navel, quantum leap at the navel, and therefore females traditionally have become dependent on the male. In India, this is just to an extent of pathetic. In the Western countries, thanks to women's lib movement, this does not happen anymore as much. It still happens for half of America's population. As you know, they're still completely dependent on their male partner to feel okay about anything. So their dependence has not gone away by any means. But at least there is an awareness, a mental awareness about it. But the mental awareness does not transfer to the vital awareness. And therefore, women still do not develop a strong navel chakra. How to develop it is, of course, not only to be nourished in the stomach, and that also, of course, does not happen because of this social media, Instagram, and attachment to that body image that I don't look okay. How many girls do you meet who complain, I don't look okay, I don't look okay? That is, that produces a huge weakness in the navel chakra. And the other thing that produces weakness in the navel chakra is that females are constantly told to take care of everybody, not themselves, take care of everybody, never to pamper themselves. They should do it equally. Boys should also look at others to serve and similarly be served. Girls should also do the same way. If we did not differentiate between boys and girls in that crucial age, the girls would have much more autonomy than it is. And the final thing, it's a very sensitive area, so we won't go too much into it. But it's the sexuality as well, and that is much more at puberty. But even early, the point is that we become very concerned about touch and girls. And this is a problem, of course, because there are always these predators, males who are looking to violate a girl. That is true. So parents have to be careful. But we do it to such an extent that the girls miss much of the, in fact, boys too. I mean, this is something that both of them miss, but boys in other ways get a boost in the navel, whereas girls never get to make up for the missing of the hugging from their male counterpart, male father. father needs to pay more attention to the girls, and there should not be so much uh, well, how can I say it? I mean, I know about child abuse, okay? I know about child abuse. I know how parents are completely unfit to, male parents are completely unfit sometimes to interact with the girls, and mothers have to be cautious. But at the same time, imagine the deprived nature of the child from one parent's love, which is expressed mostly in hugging, embracing, touching, and these are very difficult issues in the current culture. Males
So,
have to learn really a lot more sensitivity in the sexual area.
and so what you're saying, it sounds like for parents to help their children of both sexes, of all sexes, to develop a strong chakra system, particularly in the navel and the heart, is what you were talking about, is that love expressed in hugging, in physical skin to skin touch, in that kind of connection helps to connect or helps to radiate the chakra energy in a proper manner so that children, as they're growing, then have a greater sense of themselves. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, girl children, they naturally open their heart because they're told to do that. Okay, you love your little brother, you love your father, you give, you bring whatever they want, they learn to serve. That is fine. What they don't learn is to receiving. Receiving is what gives them strength in the self-love. Okay, I am valued, I'm worth it. So my father hugs me when I bring something to him. My brother hugs me when, everybody is so tensed up about abuse that they forget that we are not nourishing the girl child properly. This is just such a shame. I mean, why can't the parents just take sensitivity training and learn the difference between abuse and loving?
And the ability to receive then can be expressed with children from parents in what ways that we can actually say to them, or how do
Always
we
appreciating.
reinforce with
Saying to them is good, Kathleen, that's part of it certainly. But non-verbal, the feeling to feeling, non-locality, that is what we're trying to establish. This is why I mentioned hugging. It is just so important to let the child know that it is worth it. It is being appreciated. And that appreciation is what strengthens the navel chakra. They seldom get that.
that
Even
is thank you so much for saying appreciation. We know the research at Heart Math and all that's been going on for so many years is so beautiful. And that kind of emotion, that when you're talking about non-locality, your child does not even need to be near you for you to send this beautiful energy to them. Is that right? They could be in another room, they could be staying with their grandparents, they could be outside playing, and you could be sending them this kind of energy. Is that right?
Yeah, and also I'm glad you mentioned grandparents. That's something many children completely miss. See, by the time we become grandparents, most people do not have any sexual problem about touching a girl. So grandparents lavish their, I know I did, I learned by the time I became grandparent, I really learned to hug, and I lavished my grandchildren when they are very young with my really embracing and loving and playing with them, tickling and all that game that children love. All this is something that children need. But grandparents, they are no longer part of our life, and that is happening even before COVID. Okay, COVID has made everything very difficult, agreed. But people talk about psychological traumas brought about by COVID. It is really very true because grandparents have not been able to hug their children, grandchildren for entire years sometimes until vaccines got ready. And this has been a tragedy for many children. because they don't get it from parents, they don't get it from the caregiver, which most parents leave their children with, the young children. And if they don't get it even from grandparents, where do they get it? They just don't get it. And if they don't get it, they feel unloved and weak navel chakra. And add to that social media, add to that Instagram, and you get all these misfit children with various disorders.
Well, if we can go up in the process a little bit, because you talk about something that's very interesting and that some embryologists have explored, and that is the morphogenetic fields.
Yes.
And is this when a child or when an embryo is forming, when the very first cells start to divide and all of this, that the cells differentiate themselves, they know automatically, kind of innately where to go, that they are a cell of a liver, they are a heart cell, and they just go there. Is that what that is, or what is it?
Yeah, so the consciousness knows about the organ through these morphogenetic fields. And the morphogenetic fields are the fields that consciousness uses to bring the software to the organ's hardware. So what the organ will do, this process is now very well established. The genes are, of course, part of the hardware, but the genes don't activate by themselves. They have to be turned on to make the proteins that is appropriate for that organ. And this is where the cells become differentiated, because every cell comes with different set of instructions from consciousness with the help of this morphogenetic field, which then determines the function of that organ. And that function of the organ, which proteins to make, that depends on this morphogenetic field software, the vital software.
And so does this mean that every cell has consciousness then?
Of course, every cell has consciousness. Life is consciousness. Without consciousness, there is no distinction between life and non-life. And we know that's an utter mistake that molecular biology made some 60 years ago. We are still suffering from that mistake, and it's still not corrected.
What's the mistake? What mistake are you talking about? That there is no consciousness? Or?
You know the word molecular biology, right? Why is it called molecular biology? Biology declared that molecules determine everything. There is no distinction between life and non-life, except living creatures have these big molecules. That's the only difference. So big molecules, protein and DNA, RNA, those things somehow conspire and makes living objects different. But of course, this does not recognize what is involved. How does consciousness arise? How is the ability of distinguishing between the living cell and the environment, that this is food, this is not food, this is poison, this is to be avoided? How does this, I am not safe from this molecule, but I'm safe from this molecule. In fact, this molecule is what I need to take in for nourishment. How does it develop this ability of distinguishing between itself and the environment? This concept is what basically defines life, and this requires consciousness. And consciousness requires those morphogenetic fields in order to connect to the hardware.
Well, it is so important, Dr. Goswami, to understand this notion, because if we think of our child as a blank slate that is coming in, that we are responsible for forming, that's entirely different than considering that this child has full consciousness and comes from consciousness, and the cells of this child, even in utero, are conscious.
Absolutely. And add to this, I have not even mentioned another factor, which is still controversial, but should not be. There is so much data in favor of it, which is reincarnation. Child actually brings quite a bit of expertise already. This is clear if you have dealt with young children, because they pick up things so fast. And there are children who don't pick up things very fast. So you know that there is a difference between some children picking up some things very quickly. How are they doing it? They are doing it because they brought these programs from past life. And this
And,
is what
and
travels from
you
life.
talk you talk about the string of pearls. Can you tell us what that is? Yes,
Yes.
it's beautiful.
Yes, we live as a pearl in a string of pearls, and we cannot forget the contribution of the pearls that went before me to form who I am. And we have to reconcile. No, this is very difficult, agreed, but we have to take what is and deal with it. The fact is that the brain does not develop at the same rate for all children. This is coming now to post 5-year-old. So child is now at school. The child is learning reading, writing, arithmetic, all these things, all these capacities. And for some children, these capacities are already established. I learned to write, read very soon after I learned to speak, which was at age 3. By at age 4, I was already reading, writing, doing arithmetic. So, very quickly came to me. Does not happen for children who did not have many reincarnational expertise. And their expertise may be in something else. Their expertise may be in music. Their expertise may be in art. What we do is we put the same clothes and hope that the same clothes will fit everybody. It doesn't. Same shoe doesn't fit every fit. So this simple mistake that the brain does not grow at the same rate, whereas we are feeding the children the education at a constant, same uniform rate for everybody, like their machines. They're not. And this is the big problem. And how to solve this problem? Education, of course, becomes expensive. You have to separate them out and make adjustments, right? We do that for talented and gifted now. In many schools, there is a talented and gifted section. But similarly, we should have make room for people who are into other kind of talents, people who are really rather deficient in having talents from past life because they're relatively new souls, pearls.
Pearls. So the string of pearls that you mentioned, every pearl is an incarnation, is a lifetime. And
Right.
you're saying that so a child who may come in and has a kind of a well-developed string of pearls might take to things very quickly in a certain aspect, and someone who might have 1 or 2 pearls in their string of pearls, 1 or 2 incarnations, 1 or 2 lifetimes behind them, is still learning the ropes, so to speak.
That's right, exactly. And we see that, no? We see that. And if we try to give them education in the same speed, same rate, then it's utterly unfair to them because it's not their fault what is happening.
Well,
And
it occurs to me that the awareness of this can be helpful, certainly in terms of educators of young children, and also parents who can choose to place them or to enable a different kind of learning environment. There are forest kindergartens, for example. There's Montessori, there's Waldorf, there's Reggio Emilio. There's different approaches that seem to honor the spiritual aspect of children being kind of unfolding as they need to or as they want to. But that may not be the overarching place where people go.
Good. However, they don't take reincarnation into account, not yet. Although it is true that they could, because there is awareness of that in the Montessori tradition. So I hope that everybody is gathering information about the new data, which is so definitive. Nobody should doubt the phenomenon anymore.
What data are you talking about in terms of this? You're talking about children telling their stories and things?
Children's memory, but also data that we are getting from channeling phenomena, and also data from Stan Grof. Stan Grof takes these people back to their moment of birth, and they start remembering things from that moment of birth. because some of the events never really collapsed, and they now collapse in the adult brain, and we can analyze what happened with our mind, and therefore we get a picture that really suggests that we have memories of what happened before birth. So now we have not only near-death experiences telling people what happens after death, but we also have records of experiences of people what happened before birth. So both ends we get information, and those informations can only be explained if you take a reincarnational framework, right? Before birth is an impossible experience if death is the end of it all. So we now have really solid evidence of both the after-death existence, channeling, and then near death, the first stages of what happens after death, clearly recorded in the Tibetan Book of the Dead and other spiritual traditions. And so confirmation of that, and again, Stangraf's experiment confirms what happened before birth. Indeed, people do remember those going through heavenly realms, hell realms, and all that. And that gives us a complete verification of the esoteric schools that are telling us about reincarnation. You know, it's part of Christianity as well before the 5th century. The Gnostic tradition always had respected reincarnation.
And so you're really talking about if we are, as parents, as educators, as a society, understanding that when we see a child, we see a string of pearls. We don't just see the child as they are in that moment. We see the child as wholly everything that they've brought into that moment from other lifetimes.
Also, notice this, Kathleen. I mean, Einstein used to say that God is not malicious, but God is cunning. The cunningness expresses itself in the following situation. The point is that unless you present a stimulus, a reincarnational potentiality will not trigger. So this triggering phenomenon is very, very important. But look, when the parents are not even having the time of interacting with the child much, then how are they going to present the varied stimuli that the child really needs to see where its strength lay?
And what do you mean by a triggering? Can you explain that a little bit?
For example, I had the propensity of reading, writing very early. It expressed very, very early. And suppose my parents were farmers. They had no access, no need for their children to engage in reading, writing. They would rather have me milk the cow as soon as I was able to. And that's what I mean. So it will never be triggered. I had this potentiality, but it will never be triggered. Only when I go to school, when I will be going as an ignoramus, will that be triggered. And then all of a sudden I have a spark of quick learning about it, but the schools are not going to adjust to that. Schools have moved in their own way, at their own assumptions that I am like a normal child, not a late bloomer. There's no scope for such late bloomers. You know, much of the phenomenon of autism, it becomes complicated, not only because what we spoke earlier, that stuff that comes from the mother, but also the point is that they don't get a fit with their propensities and the opportunities of expression that is in their environment. The parents never give them enough attention and do not create variation in what they're experiencing. So they become dejected. Okay, is this what life is? And they withdraw more and more inside because they don't find anything stimulating, because their propensities are just not getting either triggered, or even if triggered, is not getting any good environment to be nourished. So these are definitely traumatic conditions, and much of childhood trauma is because of these insensitivities that everybody is producing without really wishing it. I'm not blaming parents, by the way. I'm just saying they're not trained. And part of it is worldview, part of it is the culture, and definitely the information culture is really, really deadly.
Dr. Goswami, how does karma fit into this? How does karma, in terms of reincarnation, in terms of understanding who this child is who has come to us, how does this fit into us fully having a picture where we can support our child and, by the way, understand ourselves?
Yeah, of course. So let's go into trauma a little bit. Trauma is a brain phenomenon. It is important to understand why children are particularly susceptible to trauma. Because as I mentioned earlier, the hippocampus is not fully developed. Hippocampus is what gives us a time sequence to thinking. Otherwise, an event occurs, event has many components, but that time sequence of the happening of the components, that ability children don't have. In fact, young children, very young children, closer to 1 rather than 5, would process more with their feelings. And in that dimension, we don't have much complication at all. No ability of, animals don't have time consciousness. Everybody knows that. So children also similarly have no specific time consciousness. A little bit of mind is there, so little ability is there. And this is the ideal condition for trauma to set up. An event occurs, which is hugely negative to the child's health. Child immediately recognizes the danger, gets hugely upset. But of course, it cannot remember the sequence because the memories of that event is vague. Now, here is the thing. To a child, it does not have to be a cobra trying to bite the child to produce a trauma. Much more traumatic is the condition when the parents have left the child to a caregiver without properly explaining why they have to leave the child. They are saying, oh, parents are deserting me, right? And that produces, I had a trauma like that. And it took many years to get rid of this feeling that unloved people will quit on me. People who love me will quit on me. That fear affected all my relationships. I was constantly trying to make situations where it makes quitting very hard. And of course, that kind of relationship, you can guess, that just does not work because I'm neglecting the really important thing, which is love. But this is what happens to children. We do that without knowing what we are doing.
And so in a greater sense of knowing and developing greater consciousness, which is what you are on the planet doing here and what this summit is about and our conversations and all, in developing this greater consciousness to understand a trauma with a child, perhaps we need to understand the karma that they have, the dharma they have, this kind of a deeper understanding of their string of pearls to the extent possible, or even not understanding it, but just understand it's there. That trauma with a small t, for example, that if we use non-locality to, in fact, discuss with the child, you're going to be going here for a couple of hours. I'm coming back to get you. You're safe at home, that kind of thing. Does it seem that we can use the notions of that go along with reincarnation, such as karma, and you talk about poker karma, which I'd like to know a little more about, but karma, so some of the predilections we might have come in to experience in this life, and dharma, which I'd like you to also address if possible too. If we are simply aware that those are things that occur with our children as well as ourselves, perhaps we can use this beautiful notion of quantum science, the non-locality of things, to pave the way to a more loving approach.
Absolutely. We can, and we can have sensitivity between parents and children. It will benefit parents as well, because parents also miss the emotional connection, positive emotional connection, especially fathers, if they understood the mechanism much better, then fathers could open up And really that would help the relationship of the marriage as well. So all kinds of things are tied up with our not understanding, even non-locality. Let's mention here one very important thing about non-locality. Non-locality is not enough, because the problem with non-locality is that as soon as you have an experience, the connection goes away. And so the child connection comes back immediately because the child is innocent. But for adults, it's not so easy. Adults have to practice it. That practice in quantum psychology we call tangled hierarchy. If we establish a two-way relationship with the child, then what happens is that non-locality is no longer dependent on proximity and interacting with the child to repeatedly fall into that non-locality. Even if I am away, this is the key that parents have to understand, that they are, by the culture, by their job necessity, have to be away. I'm not suggesting that people give up jobs and, that's old-fashioned way of treating mothers, that finished. We cannot do that. But if we are to allow mothers to work outside, we also have to recognize the need of the child, which is not going to be satisfied by the caregiver, who is a stranger after all. And she has other children to take care of too, not just one. So but if the parent is in a tangled hierarchical relationship, and the beauty of a tangled hierarchical relationship is that it, as I said, it does not depend on proximity. So the mother can be away, father can be away at work, and still the child does not feel that they're by himself or herself. They feel the support. See the beauty of it. This is why husband wives, when they have this tangled hierarchy between them, then the trust is no problem. Even if they're away, they can just completely rely on each other's love, because they can feel the other's love even at a distance. The non-local connection never breaks. It comes back.
This is, thank you so much for helping us understand this. And you have said, and I'm going to quote here, that studies and objects that used to be more esoteric are now becoming more scientific. And formally practical down-to-earth science is becoming more abstract and less useful. And spiritual traditions are becoming more like science. You've mentioned this, and so it seems like there's more of an integration occurring. Would that be all right?
Yes, this integration needs to enter the fiber of the society. We are right now going in the opposite direction. I must tell you the alarming, you know all this. I mean, you read newspapers as much as everybody does, I'm sure. And you know how people have become literally uncivilized, not able to even greet another person with greetings anymore. People
with love.
Love is a big word, but even with decency, even with pretend love, people cannot relate anymore. They are rude, downright rude in airlines, in airplanes, in the grocery stores, everywhere. They go to a person who is serving and they will be rude like the person is a stranger. And of course, they would be rude to strangers. That has always been an undercurrent: racism, strangerism, sexism. But though they are now exacerbated, all of this. So, what is the remedy? We need the worldview polarization has to give way to an integration. The polarization between science and religion has to give way to this integration that quantum science is doing. And then we have to go through our different relationships. This is where it has hurt the most, but not only social relationship, but also intimate relationship, and not only intimate relationship between adults, but most importantly, intimate relationship with our own children. The children are the silent sufferers from the ills of materialism. These are the children who are growing up to be people who are completely vulnerable to manipulations by politicians. And we wonder about all these people who are manipulated by politicians. They fall prey to social media, they fall prey to disinformation. How can we prevent that when we are helping that with the polarization of worldviews? We are helping that by saying that no, truth does not exist. Everything is just movement of matter, and there are material laws, and that's it. There's no values, there are pretend values. We pretend only for keeping civilization kind of on the surface. But all this is just so false, you know.
And you're saying it's false because it does not include consciousness. Is that right? And the quantum activism is all about consciousness exists. And that is what matters instead of the molecules that make something physical.
Yeah, and you know, the tragedy is that the data is there. Neuroscience data is now showing that the brain occasionally does become non-local. And non-locality material objects can never be non-local without the help of consciousness. So
I love that statement. Love that statement. You talk also about that a quantum worldview is like dual caretaking of our outer selves, of the outer world, and then the subtle inner world, which seems to be a very important message for parents, for educators, grandparents.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for saying this.
Yes, the outer inner creativity conditioning, which in the older tradition used to call the above and below dichotomy. And we already have talked about male-female dichotomy that is coming from males get to have strength in the navel, females get to have strength in the heart, but both need strength at both places in the body. And an acknowledgement that, yes, there are emotions in the body, they can be positive, and they're very important for us. And it is most important to acknowledge the positive emotions that children can give us routinely. And if we reciprocate, then the children get a boost, and that way we can assure that the children will have a strong navel.
Thank you, Dr. Goswami. And I have one last question for you. You've mentioned it a little bit, but what is a quantum leap?
Okay, aside from non-locality, let's formalize this concept. Let me tell you the phenomenon that that first told us about quantum leaps. Niels Bohr, the great Danish physicist, discovered it. When electrons make a jump from one atomic orbit to another, it does not go through the intervening space. It does not go through intervening space. It is jumping. It's like I'm jumping from the side to the floor without going through the space. Of course, macro bodies, we cannot do that, but electrons do that routinely. This is called a quantum leap, a discontinuous movement. Are we capable of discontinuous movement? Not with the physical body. These are too big. Electron is small, it can do it, but we can do it with our mind. So in creativity, we routinely take these quantum leaps. Without using algorithm, we discover something new because the insight comes to us. That could not be reached by arguments, that could not be reached by national step-by-step algorithms. So that's the concept of quantum leap. Discontinuous movement.
Discontinuous movement that results in a large change. Yes, and I'm going to say, Dr. Goswami, I think that you have brought many of us into our own quantum leap in this last hour of our discussion. And so I thank you for that. And are there any last things that you would like to offer around the topic of quantum parenting?
Well, quantum parenting, I really could not overstate the importance of empathy and developing this tangled hierarchical relationship with the children. We should respect the children. It sums up in the simple respecting, a mutual respect. Children should learn to respect their parents, and mostly they still do. But parents have complete disregard for the importance of children in their lives. That has to give way to a mutual respect. This is what tangled hierarchy really is. The ability to respect the other, although it is a child, but the child may be more intelligent than I. You know, this realization, this possibility. we don't distinguish between a little one who is developing versus, oh, I'm all grown up, I know so many things. Well, that kid may know so many more things.
They have more pearls, perhaps.
That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Goswami, for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your insights today. Very grateful.
Thank you.